Hello film fans and welcome to this episode of the Sherlockian. Now if I said to you the words dinosaurs and cinema, it's a fair bet you'd think of Jurassic Park. I've been asked by Matthias Zenklusen, I hope I pronounced that right, I probably completely butchered it, but I've been asked by Matthias to review Jurassic Park for this channel. As I always say, I'm always open to suggestions for new videos. In fact, I welcome them. I mean, I'm if not easily flattered. So thank you, Matthias, for the suggestion, and here's what I think of the film. Now, it isn't much of an exaggeration to say that this film series was really a sort of a trendsetter in cinema. Before Jurassic Park, the idea of using computer-generated imagery, I won't go so far as to say it had never been done before, but it was kind of seen as kind of a bit of an out there, wacky idea. And generally speaking, most filmmakers still relied on traditional methods of sort of puppetry and creation of models. But after this, which pioneered the use of sort of models, and then they kind of built the CGI around it, basically traditional kind of model making and puppetry was, I wouldn't go so far as to say extinct, but it was on its way out. This really raised the bar for special effects. And it's very easy to see why. Even today, the special effects look amazing. I go so far to say as if most of them were in one of the modern Jurassic Park or Jurassic World films, you wouldn't bat an eyelid. You really can't tell much of a difference. There's a little bit here and there on the textures, and the scene where the Gallimimus are being chased and ultimately one gets eaten by the T-Rex is a little bit ropey. I think, if I remember rightly from some videos I watched on the subject, they actually didn't really finish that sequence, and they basically had to rush the final film into production kind of thing. So that bit wasn't quite finished, but even that's not terrible. I mean, that's as anything as good as the Walking with Dinosaurs series, and that has actually quite good CGI for the time. So they really did an excellent job. However, the one thing I think they did even better with this film is the plot. Now, I have read the book Jurassic Park by Michael Crichton, and I'll shortly be reviewing it for the channel. But spoilers, for me, it's a bit of a mixed bag. I mean, the thing about Michael Crichton books in general is you can definitely tell there's a good idea behind the story, but when he puts it into practice, it's kind of a bit clunky. Now, this is a bit mean because Michael Crichton actually wrote the screenplay. I mean, he co-wrote the screenplay for this film, so he must have been doing something right. And I mean, the idea of a park, obviously full of dinosaurs, is integral to his original storyline. So it's a bit mean to criticise him too harshly, but I think it's fair to say that the film streamlines his original plot and does it a lot better. For instance, that really fun scene where they're taken on that ride and they have that little piece of DNA telling them how dinosaurs are created. In the book, that was probably about 3 or 4 chapters and went on for ages until you were fed up with it. By contrast, in the film, it's quite fun, and they quickly, the scientists quickly, hijack the ride and go off and see things for themselves anyway. So it doesn't take too much time, even if you did find that bit either annoying or boring. The other thing it does expertly well in the film is the way it uses dinosaurs. For a start, you see dinosaurs at the beginning, obviously, when they see the brachiosaur for the first time. But then the film does a really good job. Up until the T-Rex, the T-Rex scene, which we'll talk about in a minute, where it bites the car in half and stuff. You haven't really seen many dinosaurs apart from the little raptor when it emerges from the egg. And I think that's a really, really clever use of dinosaurs in the film. Unlike the modern Jurassic World films, which almost stuff dinosaurs down your throat until you're fed up with them, this does a really good job of sort of using them cleverly. I mean, I really like the bit when they're on the ride and they're going through the park on those electric jeeps and they don't see any dinosaurs. I think that's really funny because, of course, when you go to zoos, you often, they show you a cage with supposedly it's got porcupines in it, but they're all asleep. And so I really like the fact that that works the same way with dinosaurs, and the characters are really funny when they're sort of just sitting around in the jeeps looking bored, which I also quite enjoyed. Speaking of the T-Rex scene, for me it's probably the best scene in the film. And when I watched it, I sort of thought, and the leg of the goat comes down onto the top of the car, and the little girl, I think her name is Lex, screams. I sort of thought, oh yeah, this was made by Steven Spielberg. Yeah, he directed Jaws. And there are, of course, a lot of horror elements to this film. But what I really enjoyed about it is that while it's got these horror elements, it never loses the wonder. Even after all the dinosaurs have escaped and sort of running riot. And in the modern Jurassic World films, when that happens, people sort of grab guns and go, right, we gotta sort this out. And they go off, and the wonder is almost immediately lost, and it just becomes sort of a bog standard kind of monster film with people running around screaming. For me, they've never lost the wonder in this one. I really like the fact that you've got like Tim and you've got Dr. Grant, who are both sort of dinosaur nerds. One's a professional, one's an amateur, but they still share a love of dinosaurs. And they're basically, they're traipsing back across the park. They're in fear of their lives from, being attacked by the T-Rex. But yeah, when they go to sleep, or when that scene just before they go to sleep, where they're in the tree, and Dr. Grant is calling to the brachiosaurs. That scene is really sweet, and you still get that same kind of sense of wonder you did at the beginning when you first saw one of them. Again, when they watched the T-Rex hunt, and Dr. Grant and Tim was kind of torn between thinking, oh, that's scary, which is all Lex is thinking, which is fair enough, really. She has just been, nearly eaten by one. And the others are going, oh, well, it's quite cool, though. And I like the fact that Dr. Grant even has to drag Tim away. He's going, look at the blood, which I really enjoyed. This is quite a funny film, which, again, I think the modern Jurassic Worlds don't quite ever fully grasp. They try and be funny, but they don't really work. I almost don't have the kind of character dynamics which this film excels at to really get that kind of brilliant chemistry which sort of creates the humour. It never feels forced. It feels like the kind of things people would say, at the time, even if you were in that situation for real, which I think really adds to the comedy, because you're excited, you're thinking what's going to happen next, but when somebody says something funny, you sort of chuckle along with it. It kind of feels very natural. Speaking of things being natural, there's of course the big debate in the film as to whether they should even have created the dinosaurs of Jurassic Park at all, and the experts, particularly Ian Malcolm, are vociferous in the fact that they're playing God, and it's only going to lead to disaster. Now, I've always had a kind of mixed reaction to this part of the film. I think it's an interesting idea to explore, the idea that that John Hammond has he's still in his kind of he talks about the fact the first thing he ever owned was a flea circus, and he's still kind of in that mode. He wants to control everything. He's created something without really thinking about the consequences. But on the other hand, I sort of thought, if you could create dinosaurs, you'd do it, wouldn't you? I mean, I would. I've seen this film and I'd still do it. I'd just try and put in better security measures, because they talk about the fact, that Ian Malcolm even says, that, God created dinosaurs, God destroyed the dinosaurs, God created man, and then, the next connection is, so on and so forth. Humans have tried to, play God and recreate something that's been extinct, and maybe it went extinct for a reason. But for me, I sort of thought, well, to be honest, the reason the dinosaurs escape it's not because of God. Really, it's not because of evolution. They haven't really evolved, anything extra. I mean, I know they work out how to open doors and they test the electric fence, but they haven't really developed any new set of skills that seem unreasonable. It's not because of God. It's not because of evolution. It's because the people running this park are just massive idiots. I mean, yes, they've got an electric fence, but did none of them think maybe we should build, a fence that's a bit more substantial? Something that even if the electricity goes off, it would hold the dinosaurs till we can get it back in. That fence looks pathetic. I mean, the way the T-Rex just moves through it. I mean, it's almost taller than the fence. You think, I mean, you keep deer behind a more substantial fence than that. And I know this is not an original content. This idea has been done to death, the fact that they're idiots. And of course, they're supposed to be, idiots to a certain extent. They're sort of all controlled by hubris. But even so, I've always thought, forget evolution. The people running this park are just morons. And they are at least on an island, so they can't get off. Anyway, I digress. What did I think of the dinosaurs generally? I mean, this is, after all, a channel that's kind of devolved into about science and dinosaurs in particular. So what did I think of them? Well, I really like the designs of most of them. I think they're excellent. I mean, as I've said, the CGI is virtually flawless. It looks really, really good. And I think the bits where the particularly goes really close in on the brachiosaur, the triceratops, or the T-Rex, they look lovely. I mean, and they haven't, designs are almost timeless. They haven't really changed much, even with kind of the advantages of sort of modern scientific research. The same, of course, cannot be said for the raptors. I mean, which is the main criticism of this film from a scientific perspective. I mean, the raptors are too big, and of course, they're not feathery. Now, you give them a pass on the feathers, because that wasn't generally kind of scientific sort of thought at the time. I mean, even in this film, when the archaeology students, when or rather the paleontology students, when Dr. Grant mentions that, that dinosaurs developed into birds, they all laugh, which I don't think would happen now. I mean, and that might be partly because, the people writing this screenplay, weren't archaeologists, but even so, I don't think it was kind of a scientifically accepted as it is today. So you can give them a pass on the feathers. What you can't give them a pass on is the size. Now, because even at the time, people knew, because they had fossils, that velociraptors were not 6 feet tall. I mean, weirdly, that little boy who criticises what the velociraptors look like, and he says it's just a 6-foot turkey, I always thought, Dr. Grant was a bit hard on him, really, because minus the 6 foot, he was kind of right, really. Velociraptors are generally about the size of supposed to be about the size of your knee, and of course, they wouldn't really have posed much of a threat in real life had they been running around trying to eat people, particularly 3 of them. You could have kicked them out of the way. And so that, of course, is a major criticism. Again, this is nothing new. Of course, to be fair to Spielberg and his team, you can't really criticise them because this is a fault in the original book, not... and Michael Crichton clearly knew that velociraptors weren't 6 feet tall, but the thing is, velociraptors is a recognisable name, and he could have used another dinosaur that was a similar, a real sort of potential threat, but I think he obviously thought it wasn't worth it, people just wouldn't care. And the idea of sort of 6-foot velociraptors running around, understandably has caught the public imagination. So he was clearly right from a literary perspective, if not from a scientific one. That said, the way the raptors are depicted as hunting in packs, working together, being highly intelligent, does seem quite realistic to what we currently know about raptors in general. I mean, I particularly like the bit, like the cut where Ellie Sattler is talking to Dr. Grant, and they say, so one of the raptors is contained, and she says, oh, yes, unless it can learn how to open doors, from slightly sarcastically, and then it cuts to the scene where the door handle begins to move as the raptor works out how to open the door where the children are hiding. I really like that scene, and actually, when I first saw it, I thought, well, could they really work out how to open doors? But then I thought, well, actually, we once owned a cat that worked out how to open doors, and I've owned a dog as well that worked out how to open doors, with a simple door handle. So actually the idea that a dinosaur could do it's not really that far-fetched at all. If anything, it actually is quite logical. I mean, I'm sure if they can work out, to test an electric fence in different places, I'm sure they can work out how to open a door. It's actually not that difficult. So yeah, overall, I thought this was an absolutely fantastic film. I mean, it goes without saying, really, doesn't it? The one thing I do think, though, is it's a shame it wasn't kind of like a standalone film. I think if it had been, it would probably be remembered even more fondly than it is today. The trouble with the original Jurassic Park isn't anything to do with the film, really. It's the sequels. I really like the way this one ends with just them all sort of, lying sort of back in in the helicopter and thinking, well, that was stressful. The idea that they sort of go on and people are still trying to clone dinosaurs after such an epic disaster, not to mention all the people that, would surely have got sued. It just seems a bit, well, the irony is that in Jurassic Park, the franchise has kind of developed into the sort of the cash cow and the sort of cash grab that the park was sort of portrayed as being in the film. It's kind of a shame, really. And if anyone's interested, I will review the modern ones, but I don't really want to. They almost feel a bit almost like parodies of the original, which again is a shame. Anyway, I hope the video was enjoyable. If you have enjoyed it, please consider subscribing to the channel. I'll be very grateful for your support. If you've got any more suggestions for things for me to review, please pop them in the comment section. I'll try and get back to you as soon as possible. But yeah, that was Jurassic Park. I've been the Sherlockian. Thanks very much for watching. Goodbye.